Canada's largest health unit urges March break travelers to get vaccinated as measles cases increase across the country. But is the risk really what the media and their pharma-backed health overlords want you to believe? Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News, and in light of at least a dozen measles cases being documented here in Canada, Toronto Public Health, Canada's largest health unit, has urged travelers to ensure that they are vaccinated against measles with a combination vaccine of measles, mumps, rubella, known as the MMR. But is the scaremongering justified? Let's look at the stats on this purported to be a vaccine-preventable illness or disease that was once touted as a benign childhood illness. According to the United States Centers for Disease Control, their Pink Book on measles, it is described as an acute viral infectious disease that offers lifelong immunity after recovery from the disease. Symptoms include the measles rash approximately 14 days after viral exposure, which coincides with a fever of 103 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit, runny nose, and cough. Telltale measles is also accompanied by Koplik spots, which are little white bumps in the mouth that appear before the rash. The rash typically begins at the hairline and then spreads outward and downward on the face and upper neck before spreading onto the torso and eventually to the extremities, the hands, and the feet. According to the Government of Canada, complications include diarrhea, otis media, that's pink eye, pneumonia, encephalitis, brain swelling, and death. The Globe and Mail's health columnist Andre Picard, who was appointed to the Order of Canada in 2023 for his dedication to parroting Big Pharma-influenced public health practices, has taken to social media to scaremonger Canadians about a handful of cases popping up across Canada with posts like this. In 1950, before a vaccine was available, more than 55,000 Canadian children contracted measles. It was the leading cause of blindness, deafness, and mental retardation, and more than 100 children died. What is your point? That in 2024 we should have more sick and dead children? Now, I don't think that anyone in their right mind would want to have sick or dead children, and this is the kind of irony and ironic comments coming from somebody who parroted safe and effective novel injections into the arms of babies and children over the last few years. But let's look at the actual odds of getting sick and dying with the measles. The Government of Canada's own website dedicated to measles for health professionals in Figure 1 breaks down data showing number of measles incidences per year from 1924 until 2023, and you can see that in 1950, measles cases dropped dramatically. Even more interesting is that you can see that measles cases occurring in the years directly before and after the measles vaccine was licensed here in Canada in 1963 are conveniently unavailable. So what Picard did was cherry pick a scaremongering stat during a time when cases were high without sharing the relevant elements or the context as to why cases began dropping thereafter, a decade before the vaccine was licensed. The chart shows a clear drop in cases around 1932, which coincides with the discovery of antibiotics, and again in the 1950s, which coincides additionally with remarkable growth in the sanitation industry in Canada, including public potable water supply systems, sewage systems, and water treatment plants. Increased access to global food markets, fresh fruit and vegetables, and other sources of nutrition cannot be downplayed here either, especially as the government acknowledges that vitamin A deficiency is linked to delayed recovery and greater complications with measles, and they even recommend children diagnosed with measles may be given 2 doses of vitamin A supplements, something that the mainstream media and public health seem to conveniently ignore and instead opt to promote vaccination above all else. Now, as I mentioned, the live virus vaccine for measles was first licensed in Canada in 1963. This was followed by the use of an inactive or dead virus vaccine in 1964 that was discontinued and switched back out to the live virus one sometime in 1970. Some say that because of the excessive amounts of injury and measles cases that occurred as a result were the reason for that switch up, but we will never know because Canada conveniently didn't record that data. According to Statista, the MMR vaccine, as it exists today, has the second highest vaccine adverse events incidences reported in Canada from January to June 2019. But let's go back to the 1950s, because not only were measles cases on the decline at least a decade before the vaccine came to market, deaths and complications, as referenced by scaremongering Picard, were at an all-time low as well. Look at this graph from Vital Statistics Rates in the United States. It shows the death rates for measles from 1900 until 1960. By 1950, the graph is almost flat. People may have still been getting the measles, but they certainly weren't dying in mass amounts from it. On page 602 of this same document, the measles death rate amounts to 0.2% of cases, not 0.2% of the total population. So let's break that down and put it into perspective. In 1960, the population of the United States was 179,323,175. That same year, there were 441,703 recorded measles cases. That represents 0.2% of the population that developed measles, that came down with cases. Of those 0.2% of cases, 0.2% of them would result in death. So if we extrapolate that for the entire population, the risk of death due to measles complications was a whopping 0.0004%. By contrast, on page 606, the stats show that the influenza death rate in 1960 was 4.4%, a number that remains high to this day. So how did they treat measles back in the 1950s and 60s? Well, as a benign childhood rite of passage illness. In the 1969 episode of The Brady Bunch, a classic family sitcom at the time, all 6 of the Brady kids came down with the measles.
What are you doing home from school?
They sent me home. Measles.
It's either measles or a strange case of red freckles.
You have got a temperature.
They told me 101.1. What's the record?
Never mind.
Oh, are you sure it's the measles?
Well, he certainly got all the symptoms. A slight temperature, a lot of dots, and a great big smile.
A great big smile.
No school for a few days.
Say hello to my dotted son for me. Tell him I'll bring him some comic books and I'll see you later, dear.
Okay, honey, bye.
Boy, this is the life, isn't it?
Yeah, if you have to get sick, you sure can't beat the measles.
That's right. No medicine.
Inside or out? Like shots, I mean.
Don't even mention shots. Yuck!
Measles, measles, measles. Well, all the kids have now had the measles.
So have I.
Well, I had them years ago. Looks like the Bradys are finished with the measles.
Hold it. You're not through yet.
Alice, don't tell me you're coming down with the measles.
Oh, I hope so. I'd hate to think I was just learning how to blush at my age.
Now, despite widespread vaccination in Canada with the first shot of the MMR given to babies between 12 and 15 months of age and a second dose given around 18 months, it's not considered to be a sterilizing vaccine. The Government of Canada says 2 doses provide lifelong immunity in most people. As dissected by the anonymous X account Golden Pup, who is a stickler for sourcing government data and charting it out in an easy to read and understand way, in Canada's outbreak from the years 2013 to 15, there were 697 cases seen across the country, and 4% of them were considered breakthrough cases happening in vaccinated individuals over the age of 1, since that's a demographic that isn't eligible to be vaccinated. Interestingly, there were no cases in those aged 60 and up, which is a demographic supposed to be at the greatest risk of complications from this infection. But lucky for them, they were born before the 1963 vaccine licensing and subsequent rollout, and therefore undoubtedly have robust natural immunity. Now, with the CDC penning the MMR vaccine adverse events as fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, occurring in 5 to 15% of recipients, a rash in 5%, febrile seizures, anaphylaxis, etc., Is the risk of an adverse event for a vaccine that doesn't guarantee protection against the infection it's meant to target for an infection that carries similar complication risk levels to the vaccine really worth it? That's up to each individual to consider the risks versus the benefits. That's the cornerstone of informed consent. Do the purported benefits outweigh these inherent risks? Canadians have to be told the real statistics and the facts before they can adequately weigh that analysis for themselves. And if they're relying on the mainstream media fearmongers or the big pharma-backed public health overlords, then they probably aren't getting this kind of unbiased information. Subscribe and follow me if you appreciate it. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. In response to the safe and effective narrative, we've launched a campaign at nomoreshots.ca where you can find credible, well-researched reports on the safety and efficacy around the COVID-19 vaccines. You can also send a forum email to Minister of Health Mark Holland calling on him to revoke market authorization for these uncertain products. Find out about that at nomoreshots.ca and consider supporting my work if you appreciate it. Thanks so much.